If you'd like to make your NFL games a little more interesting, you've come to the right place. It's the Even Money Podcast with Ross Tucker and Steve Fizzik.
Yeah, Vegas, baby, Vegas. It is the Even Money Podcast presented by DraftKings, that Champ Series thing they have going on right now. The casino app, Champ Series, use the code Ross. Crazy. Might even mention it more a little bit later in the show. Check me out on social, please, at Ross Tucker NFL, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Those of you that listen to the Ross Tucker podcast know that's how you can become the Spread the Word winner via social media each week. Then you can also follow us at Ross Tucker Pod, which is how you get the knowledge immediately when any of these shows are posted. You know, the highlight clips from each show are posted. You can check them out at youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL as well. We've got the DraftKings Best Ball Contest going on the Fantasy Feast podcast. For those of you that want to go against me and Joe in a best ball draft, things are happening. We are less than a month away from NFL training camps opening, which is why in a few minutes, Steve Fizzik will tell you exactly what 3 games you should strongly consider making a wager on now. And we'll also get my boy Kiev O'Neil from the Odds Breakers podcast. He's a stud. He's got projections on the Pythagorean win total for these teams now that there's 17 games. This is what I like. I like when other people do a lot of research, put a lot of time into it, and then just give me the answers. It's like high school and college all over again. It is amazing. Usually the guy with the answers is Steve Fizzik at Fizzik Sports on Twitter and only at Fizzik Sports. Last week, he was dropping bombs about mountain towns in Colorado being the ideal vacation place. People are sending me emails and tweets being like, "Oh, Breckenridge, oh, Aspen." Like, don't come to me. Go to Steve. Steve, hello. How are you?
Well, I'm kind of sore because I continued my hiking post Colorado. I just climbed up to Griffith Peak and back. My wife and my son, no problem. I felt like I was crawling to the summit, 11,000-foot mountain here in southern Nevada, but I made it. Just took most of the day.
Hey, that reminds me, Steve, before I forget, I just found out I think I'll be doing a game at Nevada this year, not UNLV, at Nevada that's in Reno, right?
Yes.
Reno
University of Nevada, Reno.
Can I fly in there? Does Reno have a decent airport?
Reno does have a decent airport. It is circled by mountains, so it can be a little tricky on the approach in the wintertime. But in fact, most people that go to Tahoe fly into the Reno airport. It's about a little over an hour and 10-minute drive. The Tahoe airport's so small.
God, all right. Well, that's in October, so I think hopefully I will be okay. Kiev, you live in Arizona, correct?
That's correct. Chandler, Arizona.
All right. So what is the ideal vacation spot for you? Since Steve is convinced that a mountain town in Colorado is the ideal vacation last weekend.
Well, when you're surrounded by mountains, I mean, that's a 2-hour drive for me. So if I feel like getting my hiking boots on like Steve, which is very impressive, by the way, making it up 11,000 feet, Steve, not too far of a trip for me. But I just got back from Key West about a week and a half ago, and that place is just a trip, man. It's almost like you're in a different world in Key West. They have their own rules. Some of those bars on the 3rd floor you might want to ask about before you go up there. And they have the best food and great fishing. It was just a fantastic time. I know I went from summer, but going from 115 down to 95 isn't so bad when you're used to it.
115, dude. It is 94 degrees right now in central Pennsylvania, and I feel like I am sitting on the sun right now.
I'll tell you this, man, the humidity does make a difference, and thank goodness we're only at about 100 today. So huge difference, right? But it depends. What do you want? An oven that's extra hot or a wet oven that's lukewarm? I lived in the Midwest so many years, and sometimes it doesn't even matter, my man. But I'll tell you this: when I do visit the Midwest, I feel like I sweat more than I ever do because now I'm used to being in the dry air.
Keeping it rolling. Let's get to the NFL now. And Kiev, it's interesting. It's perfect timing to have you on. A couple weeks ago, Steve was on that legendary vacation, and my buddy Nick Costos was on, and he talked about the Pythagorean win expectation. Last week, I asked Steve about it because I never heard of it before, and you actually did a deep dive on extrapolating the Pythagorean win breakdown for 17 games. Can you explain what you did, the work that you put in?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at the Pythagorean win total, it's just based upon the right triangle. A squared plus B squared equals C squared, right? And it's kind of the formula to figure out the difference between 2 points. You're looking for the side C. And it kind of works out when you're looking at points scored and points against. When you're looking at any sport, really, there's different exponents and different arguments about it. But the truth is, let's look at the extreme situation. A team can go 17-0 and win every game by 1 point, right? I mean, Is that a 17-win team if that happens, or were they just that guy that won the Powerball lucky, right? So, I mean, that happens in football. And on the other side end of it, a team can lose every game by 1 point and be 0-16. But would you look at that situation as that they're really an 0-16 team? As sports bettors, we got to look at what happened throughout the game and why, and what the real strength of these teams are. And that's how we develop power ratings, and that's how we place our bets, efficiencies type systems as well. So what the Pythagorean wins do is it normalizes it. It tells you that this team actually was outscored last year, and they happen to have an 11-win record. There's a few teams like that. And I like to talk about the outliers, right? And so when it comes to the outliers, I did an article at theoddsbreakers.com. The biggest outlier, and I do adjust for 17 games. Basically, I just take their points scored, defensive points against, and add that back with adding a function to their actual wins. The Kansas City Chiefs, their expected win total is only 10.85 from last year, when they actually had a 14.88 adjusted for 17 games actual wins. That's about a 4-game difference. If you think about what happened with the Chiefs, they went 7-10-1 against the spread, but their last 10 games, they were burning sports bettors money. 1-9-1 against the spread their last 11 games. Won a ton of close games. Now, obviously, there's other factors. Mahomes is clutch, but they weren't quite a 14-win, 13-win type team last year. The Cleveland Browns was number 2. They only had an 8.02 expected wins compared to their 11.69 adjusted win total, expected win total last year. There were 2 outliers in the Cleveland game, though. They did get blown out by Baltimore, and Cleveland also got blown out by Pittsburgh. So I think they're more of a 9, but still they overachieved last year. The Buffalo Bills overachieved a little bit. Their actual expected wins were 11.05, and the Tennessee Titans were overachievers as well by a little bit. 9.19 expected wins compared to 11.69 adjusted for 17 games. So you got to look at those teams and say, well, hey, they overachieve for whatever reason, but you also got to factor in the strength of schedule.
Okay, so there's a lot there. I guess my first question is, I understand that the point of the game is to win, and that the point of the game is to score as many points as you can and prevent the other team from scoring as many points as you can. But I feel like there are times in different games where maybe they're behind by a lot, so the coach decides not to show certain things, or maybe they're behind by 7, so he goes for the touchdown when he could get a field goal, right? Stuff like that. How does that – I mean, is it fair to say, Kiev, you think that stuff all washes out in the end? Because in my mind, I always think, similar to what I say about the spread sometimes, right? which is that the coaches aren't coaching against the spread. They're just coaching to win the game. The coaches are not coaching for the Pythagorean wins. They're just coaching that situation at that time, which I think affects in, I would say, at least a handful of games a year, how many points they score or allow.
Yes, absolutely. But in the larger the sample size, the more that wipes away, Ross. But you also have to remember that it works the other way as well. You know, maybe the Kansas City Chiefs could have scored that extra touchdown against somebody, and they didn't. You know, in many cases, that's called garbage time. We try to take out garbage time when it comes to some of the efficiency stats that you use. Some of the great websites that do that is Football Outsiders. You know, they do a fantastic job with their DVOA, you know, taking out some of that garbage. And that's what you have to look at. You know, but, you know, it's all that's more of an in-game type betting type situation here. When you're talking about an aggregated amount of points throughout the whole year, you have a pretty decent sized sample, especially if you look back a few years as well. And you can make some decent judgments of that. But to be honest with you, there is no perfect stat, Ross, and pretty much everything can be picked apart.
Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's solid to take a look at bottom line is how many points did you score? How many did you give up? And every time you have a 35-point differential, that's worth the win. So you tell me a team outscored their opponents by 70 points, that should have been a 10-6 team. If they go 12-4, they're overrated. If they go 8-8, they're underrated. Now, Kiev brought up a fascinating point that these outliers, when you've got a Cleveland team that gets bombed by Baltimore, all right, and they lose by 50, you probably should say, all right, you know, after you lose by 30, really the last 20 points, it wasn't your day, whatever. You shouldn't count it as a minus 50 against that team. So you can make some tweaks and adjustments. But I know that people in baseball have tried to do that where they say, all right, if a team loses 17-1, I should grade that like a 9-1 loss. And as it turns out, it's actually better to use the 17, I believe, long-term as a predicting model of how a teams can do. So, it's, you know, it's pretty darn strong that don't look at the final win-loss record of a team. Look at points scored, points against.
It's really interesting. So what are the teams, Kiev, you said are overvalued or overrated again?
So the overachievers, and I don't want to use overrated, Ross, because we don't know how that's going to factor into what the market says on a game-by-game basis. I just want to say if they overachieved or not, so I can kind of think of what they're being set with as a season win total and how I'm going to approach looking at this team in the 2021 NFL season. The four teams are the Kansas City Chiefs, number 1, that overachieved, the Cleveland Browns, number 2, the Buffalo Bills, number 3, and the Tennessee Titans were number 4. There's underachievers, and that's important too. The Atlanta Falcons, burning sharp people's money for years. It was the number 1 underachiever there. Expected wins of 7.92 compared to their 4.25 with the points that they scored. Very inconsistent. The Jaguars were number 2. The Houston Texans were number 3. And the Philadelphia Eagles were number 4. If you remember, Houston just could not win a game. Every time they had the edge, they would give up a big touchdown. Games against the Titans and a few other teams like that.
Love it. Love it. And so what you do is, does that have an impact? Have you already bet some of the season win totals as a result, Kiev?
Yeah, I bet some of those season win totals, and there's a few different ways of looking at it. The best way is to probably power rate every single game, and then you have your lines and you come up with the percentage and you add up the percentage to see exactly what the wins are. Or you could just go by what Vegas says, you know, because Vegas, obviously the market does things that you're going to miss. You can look at all the spreads, turn them into percentages and add up every single win by doing that. And then you have an actual win total. I also like to factor in the, you know, what these teams have gained, what they've lost. New coach, new quarterbacks are the number 1 and number 2 thing, in my opinion. Changing quarterbacks huge, and what they did last year compared to what they're expected to do sometimes gives you an edge over the market. But, you know, in many cases, the market already knows that. So you got to, you know, go through with a fine-tooth comb. I did bet a few season win totals based on it.
Awesome. You know, one key point to be made here is that oftentimes these teams that we're referencing, because they were clutch and won so many games, people love betting on those teams, and they get a whole lot of support. So there is no hurry to fade Kansas City, to fade Buffalo, or to fade Cleveland this year. Money has trickled in on all those teams slowly. Kansas City started with a 12 season win. Here come the 12.5s. Buffalo 10.5 up to 11. Wouldn't surprise me if you get an 11.5. And Cleveland has been a bettor's darling over the past 4 years, even when they didn't win any games. Now that they are a playoff team. So I think these are 3 bets you may well consider making 10 minutes before the NFL season starts.
Very interesting, because as we get closer, more and more people are going to be betting the over on them.
And we already see a bias in the over-under markets. If you look at the average over-under being dealt right now, it's 8.6. And you say, well, that's just a small difference. It should be 8.5 in a 17-game schedule. And it actually should be 8.4, because with a 10-minute overtimes, we'll probably see 2 games end in a tie this year. 8.4 versus 8.6 sounds very, very small. It's actually more than significant, to the point that if you bet every team under, you probably make just a little bit of money, even with the vig.
Good stuff, guys. Speaking of good stuff, Keeps is amazing. I've been a customer for years. I'm trying to keep my hair. Kiev and Steve are hanging pretty tough there, but for all I know, they've been taking Keeps for years. Maybe they're smart like I am, and they've been taking Keeps because here's the deal. I used to have to go to the doctor, and then he would write me a prescription for the pill. Then I would have to go to the drugstore to pick it up. And then I have to go to the drugstore to get the topical solution you put on your hair, the Rogaine or whatever that you put on your hair. Here's the deal. You can get both of those directly from Keeps. That's what's amazing. You don't have to go to a doctor. You don't have to go to a pharmacy. Just get sent to your house. If you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, go to keeps.com/evenmoney to receive your first month of treatment for free. That's KEEPS.com/evenmoney to get your first month free. Keeps.com/evenmoney. Speaking of money, Steve, you've got 3 week 1 NFL bets you think are money right now. What are they?
Absolutely. And I have made these, and I'm going to make them more, add to my positions right after this podcast ends. Number 1, Jacksonville -2.5 at Houston. Based upon my numbers, I make Jacksonville a 6-point favorite on a neutral site. There is no way Houston gets 3 for home field. It's going to be a very limited home field advantage for Houston. This line's going to close 3.5. I'm going to lay 2.5 with Jacksonville.
I like it. Okay. So you're already accounting. So that's what you always talk about, Steve. It's not whether or not you win the bet. It's whether or not you beat the final number.
And I'll make a bold prediction. I'm going to give 3 plays here. I would bet even money that all 3 of these numbers, you're not going to get any of them come September, right before the games kick off.
Love it. What else you got?
Number 2, Buffalo -6 hosting Pittsburgh. I make this line just under 6 on a neutral. Buffalo's going to have a solid home field advantage. Nobody likes Pittsburgh. And the narrative's out there that their O-line stinks now. And everybody is high on Buffalo. This line's going to be closing 7.5 to 8. Everyone's going to be teasing Buffalo at that point. Instead of teasing them after the fact, let's lay some 6 right now.
Okay. All right. Laying the 6 on Buffalo. What's your third one?
Third one, Sunday Night Football, Rams -7 against Chicago. There's no real support from the Sharps for the Bears. The feeling is that Rams absolutely are going to be a contender with a huge quarterback upgrade. And the bottom line on this one, I make the Rams just a little bit less than the 7-point favorite on a neutral. Throw in home field, they go up to 9. And further, this is a Sunday Night Football game, which is going to bring out the public. Week 1, are you crazy? Everyone is going to want to bet on the Rams in this game. That's the sort of game you want to get ahead of the public. The public hasn't bet yet. Bet the Rams now before the line inflates.
Kiev, your thoughts on those 3 games and Steve's thought on the line movement for those games?
Well, I do have a question for Steve. Are you factoring in Deshaun Watson playing that first game? Or are you?
I think he has no chance to play week 1. We can have a conversation. Will he come back at some point during the course of the season? But I think at a minimum, he's going to be suspended for a period of time.
Okay. No, I first of all, I agree with all of what you said for the line move. So no matter what you do, even if the line, even if you don't like it, but you know that line's moving, you can always come back on the other side, especially if you're crossing those key numbers of 7. So I 100% agree. And the Rams one, I am a Bear fan, but I'll tell you right now, Matt Stafford's been playing on some really bad teams against the Bears, and now he finally gets an all-star team. There's a good chance that he can put one on the Bears here in LA. I think everybody's going to be very excited to see them. The Bears are not going to be ready yet. Andy Dalton's first game, and they're going to try him out. He knows that he's got Justin Fields crawling up his back. I think that just makes him a little bit more nervous or antsy. I am concerned for the Bears so I definitely agree with that one.
And don't forget, there's going to be some that are going to look at series history and say, hey, the Rams have struggled against the Bears. I don't care. Yeah, the Rams, when it's 20 degrees and Goff is the quarterback playing in Chicago in December, play poorly against the Rams. And as such, if this game was in December in Chicago, I wouldn't bet the Rams. That's not the case. The trend is meaningless to me.
All right.
You know what isn't meaningless? Having you guys on this show. Absolutely awesome stuff. Kiev, you are welcome on anytime. Make sure you check him out on Twitter. It's at The Odds Breakers. And check out his show. I've been on it. I don't know when that was, Kiev, but you can check it out. I was on it.
NFL Draft, maybe.
Oh, yeah, NFL Draft. Yes, check it out. Kiev does a terrific job as well. Love having him on the show. He will be on again. Other than that, good luck, everybody. Hope you guys win some money.
Thanks for listening to the Even Money Podcast. Make sure to also subscribe to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, the Fantasy Feast, Business of Sports, and the College Draft. All available at Apple Podcasts, rosstucker.com, or wherever podcasts can be found.
A lot of times on the show, I mentioned DraftKings. Here's what you need to know. You got to be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER, or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. By the way, if what I was talking about included a deposit bonus, doesn't always, sometimes it does. Deposit bonus requires 25 times playthrough, and deposit bonuses are paid out in site credit.